tomorrow. See you then. Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on News Nation. Breaking news tonight as a verdict is reached, in part, in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. What we are learning tonight as the jury makes a decision but also heads home. One down, one to go, and big questions also remain. The vice president casting the tie-breaking vote involving the one big beautiful bill. The president celebrating today after touring what is now being called Alligator Alcatraz.
The bill passed, and I think he's going to do very well in the House. We'll see how that works out, but it looks like it's ahead of schedule. We'll see what happens. Happy about it.
Also tonight, will Doge bite back? Round two escalating in Trump versus Musk. What the president said when asked about the government contracts of the world's wealthiest man. Plus, socialism in New York City. Democrats make Zohran Mamdani their official mayoral nominee. Scott Trainer joins me live on if it's likely that socialism will take a bite out of the Big Apple. But first tonight, a partial verdict in the Sean Combs trial. But the fate of Combs, not necessarily known here within the past 2 hours. The judge in the case said he received a note saying the jury reached a verdict on all counts except for the racketeering conspiracy charge because there were jurors with, quote, unpersuadable views on both sides. Now, the case involved the federal government with federal agents at one point raiding Combs' homes in Miami Beach and in Los Angeles in March of 2024. The raids made the criminal investigation public. Federal agents testified to things found in those raids, including disassembled AR-15 style guns, cocaine, ketamine, lingerie, 7-inch platform high heels, as well as other items. Combs is also known worldwide as a rapper, record producer, and entrepreneur. He founded Bad Boy Records and launched the careers of many successful artists, like the notorious B.I.G., Mary J. Blige, Usher as well. He also has a clothing line, other business ventures. And tonight, a jury has reached a partial verdict in the case involving Sean Diddy Combs. Our Marcus Espinosa live in New York with the very latest. Marcus?
Blake, good evening. Major breaking news here, as you described there in the trial of Sean Combs. We do not yet know his fate, but we are very, very close. We are approaching the finish line of this trial here of at least finding out if he is guilty or not guilty on these 5 major charges. So if we can bring those charges up, because they're rather complicated, and it's been a complicated case here, and I want to go over what happened today with the jury reaching a verdict on 4 of those 5 counts there. So a short while after asking the court a series of trial transcripts, the jury came back and announced they are deadlocked on the first charge, racketeering. Combs faces a total of 5 charges you're taking a look at right there, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation for prostitution. The racketeering, or RICO, that's the famous term for it. That's what most people know it as. Charge alone carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. So it's no wonder, rather, you can understand why this charge is taking the most amount of time to figure out. This will impact Sean Combs' life by far the most out of all the other charges there. The other charges could land Combs anywhere from 10 to 15 years behind bars. A jury note indicated that there are jurors, Blake, on both sides who are, quote, impersuadable on the racketeering charge. When a jury comes to an impasse like this, we got a couple of options here. There's 3. The judge can accept a partial verdict. The judge can order them to keep deliberating, or they can do what's called an Allen charge, where the judge tries to work out the impasse so the jury can reach a verdict. That's kind of what happened here, basically. It was, we had an expert on earlier, described it as a soft Allen charge. That's what's happening. They finished for the day today. All this news came in just before the end of the day for court here, before 5 o'clock. So clearly the jury was done for the day. They were no doubt exhausted, and both parties agreed, defense, prosecution, judge, let's tackle this tomorrow. So that's what's happening tomorrow at 9 a.m., bright and early. basically, the judge made sure to reiterate to those jurors, do not read anything, do not watch anything, stay focused there, and keep your mind on the task. And just one more note, a bit of color here from inside the courtroom from our amazing producers who were there describing Sean Combs as this happened. So basically a note was handed from the jury to the bailiff, and then the bailiff handed the note over to each side to find out what the note was. On that note, it was that, hey, we have reached a verdict on 4 of the 5 counts, except that RICO count there, right? So that when that happened and when Sean Combs was made aware of it, he slumped basically into his seat and put his head down, almost exasperated over the news. So reading into that, however you may like, but certainly a reactive Combs, as he has been this entire trial, but he was very visually reacted to the news of the fact that a verdict in 4 of those counts has already come down. Again, we want to be very clear. We do not know what those verdicts are yet. We may find out tomorrow, but we certainly won't know at least until tomorrow. But major breaking news here. We are certainly nearing the end of this saga here with Sean Combs.
Marcus Espinosa, live outside the courthouse there in the Big Apple. Marcus, thank you. Joining me now, Scott Bolden, News Nation contributor, attorney by trade as well. Hello, sir. And trial attorney Brian Rotello with us this evening as well. All right, guys, thanks for being with us. This news just dropped in the last hour or so. 5 charges, and we know that the jury has reached a consensus, Scott, on 4. We don't know what the consensus is or how deep the split is as well on the 5th one. What does this signal to you?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know why Diddy would be slumping in his chair, because it seems like they deadlocked, at least at this point, on racketeering that could put him in jail for life. I'll tell you one other thing that jumped out at me, and I'd like to hear what my colleague has to say, is that you need 2 predicate underlying crimes to make out a racketeering charge. They've deadlocked so far on the racketeering charge, but they've reached a verdict on these other 4. Sexual trafficking is 2 of those predicate crimes that could come under racketeering. So had they ruled that they convicted him on sex trafficking, they could easily shoehorn that into racketeering. Because they're deadlocked on racketeering, maybe they found him not guilty on those other 4 charges, or at least those 2 charges on sex trafficking. We'll see.
All right, Brian, what does this signal?
I agree with Scott, but I'm going to push back a little bit, Blake. RICO is a really hard statute, I believe my colleague would agree, to bring in any case. And especially in a case like this, for your audience, RICO is the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. This was brought really to bring down the mob and organized crime and for criminal organizations that were doing things for profit. Was Bad Boy Records, from all this evidence we heard, doing something to protect the reputation of Sean Combs? Was it doing it for money? Was the organization doing this? That, to me, is the key question in this case. And a lot of folks, I'd be interested to hear what Scott has to say, like us that try these cases, think this may have been prosecutorial overreach on the RICO case. I think that's where the jury's having a problem.
To your point, I was looking at the jury instructions on the RICO charge, and it said if you believe that he's guilty, do you feel that the prosecution has proven or not proven the following: acts involving kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, transportation for purposes of prostitution, drug distribution as well. So there's obviously lots of layers here, guys. But, you know, when this news first came down, I thought to myself, okay, there's a verdict, and this was before we knew that it was a partial verdict. But if they're split, which we then learned, I said, the judge is going to send him back in and going to tell him to keep deliberating, right? And we know that they brought the attorneys in and they discussed, what do you want to do next? And that was indeed the next step. What if they cannot get, Scott, to a decision on racketeering, given all the layers that I laid out, the difficulties that you described and that Brian described as well? And let's face it also, they're human. It's a holiday weekend coming up. They probably want a resolution at some point here in the upcoming days.
You bet they want a resolution.
Yeah.
And when I heard that they went home for the evening, I said, okay, that's one more day closer to July 4th.
Right.
I mean,
right. You figure they would want to get this. I mean, look, you obviously in you hope the jury, deliberates to its best and fullest ability. And I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just looking at the calendar like everyone else.
Yeah, let me just say this. They haven't deliberated that long. I don't think they've deliberated a day and a half, maybe 8 to 10 hours, maybe total. That's not really a long time for a complicated case like this. And there's a lot of material to go through, and then they're looking at the 4th to be with their families. I got to tell you, the prosecution witnesses had a lot of credibility issues. And the real question for this jury is, well, were the sex parties and all this was going on, was it because he was just a sexual deviant and he liked this in his personal life? Or was this a criminal enterprise that the organization did? And part of the criminal enterprise was his music business, and this is how the music business did business with these sex workers and these clients of his, or these artists that were under Bad Boy Entertainment. That in and of itself is a really tough issue to sort through because it's the entertainment industry. And I can guarantee you, Sean Diddy Combs isn't the only one in the music industry or Hollywood or New York or elsewhere that didn't have crazy parties and with sex and drugs.
Well, there's a difference between crazy parties with sex and drugs and all that. But, Cassie Ventura testified, for example, about years of abuse, drug use, sexual violence, and so on. And again, that's what the jury is taking into account and going to get to. But just to take a step back here for a second, Brian, what if they cannot get to that decision?
Well, if they can't get to a decision on the RICO statute, on the RICO claim, it ultimately means that the prosecution could have to have a decision. I think this really could happen where Mr. Combs is found guilty on these other counts, if not some or all, but not found guilty on the RICO statute because the prosecution just overcharged it for a lot of the reasons of what Scott just said. Then the question comes is, let's say that Mr. Combs is going to end up doing, depending on how the sentences go, 10, 15, 25 years tops. Let's say 10, 15 years. Do they want to push this to send him to jail for 30 years to life? For what Scott just said, is a jury sitting there before the 4th of July right now thinking, are we going to send Sean Combs to jail for 30 years to life for running a criminal enterprise? Blake, that to me is the case, and that's what this jury is thinking about right now. And the last thing I'll say is jury instructions read like stereo instructions, especially about RICO. I think this jury is having a really hard time interpreting that, regardless of the good work the attorneys did.
Again, we don't know what's going to come here. I was looking through the instructions. I ticked off some of that list. The jury charged 61 pages as well. If you're just joining us tonight, again, a decision from the jury there in 4 of the 5 counts rather. We don't know what that decision is. They are home for the evening. They will return at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning involving that man right there, Sean Diddy Combs. Scott, Brian, thank you both. Appreciate it for the expertise tonight. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blake.
All right. Still to come here on the Hill. After all, in this town, this was the big story today, and really for many parts all across the country, no matter who you are or what you do for a living, because the Senate passed the big, beautiful bill. It now heads to the House, but there are real questions about if the House Republicans will support or defy the president. This is all those tax promises, border funding, military funding, etc. What happens next when the Hill returns? I'm Blake Burman. We're back in 4 minutes. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. A dramatic, tie-breaking vote. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, pushing President Trump's one big, beautiful bill through the Senate after a grueling 27-hour marathon session. It happened after the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, struck a deal with the Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski to get to number 50, right there on the number in the Senate to pass the president's campaign promises. Murkowski called the vote on the bill, quote unquote, agonizing. The president then imploring the House not to grandstand, as he put it, but the fate of multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts, border funding, and changes to Medicaid are far from certain in the Republican-controlled House, which has the narrowest majority in modern history. Our Joe Khalil following it all up on the Hill. Got some sleep during that 27-hour session, but with us live once again here tonight. Joe?
Yeah, I was one of the lucky ones, Blake. So look, now this bill is in the hands of the House after the vice president and a couple of favors for the senator from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski. The Senate Republicans sent this thing over. This is where it's going to get challenging again. We've heard from Speaker Johnson. I actually just spoke with the House Majority Leader Steve Scalise moments ago. He says he feels confident. There's a lot there to like, but we are hearing there are moderates in the House that still have concerns about the Medicaid issue, that the cuts go too deep. And we're hearing from fiscal conservatives here that say the cuts don't go far enough. We've seen this movie before. Take a listen to what Congressman Tim Burchett told us just a while ago today.
I don't like the changes. Dadgummit, I wish we could just stick to what we said we're going to do. I don't think you can change it. There might be some technical errors or something, but I don't think there's be much change to it unless we vote down the rule and then we go back to the drawing board.
Blake, the changes he doesn't like are the ones the Senate made. So now, is the House ready to vote this out tomorrow? That is their goal. As I'm talking to you, leadership is whipping everybody, trying to get everyone on the same page. It has looked dark in the past for them, and they've gotten it across the finish line before. We'll see if they do it again.
All right, Joe Kay, live in the Capitol hallways. Joe, thank you. So the bill now is over to the House, as Joe mentioned, for a vote there, or at least we think. Here's a look at some of what's in it. The One Big Beautiful Bill extends the tax cuts that Republicans and the president passed in 2017. That's really in the core of this here. It also contains some of the president's big campaign promises from last year, like limiting taxes on tips and overtime. It also includes a temporary $40,000 cap for the state and local tax deduction. That's 4 times the amount right now. It also includes funding for military spending, border security as well, and an increase in the child tax credit. It was a hard-fought battle to get that bill passed in the Senate, which also has a narrow margin. Senators grappling over some tough sticking points, including changes to Medicaid that reduce how much the federal government pays for the program. It also includes more work requirements for SNAP benefits or food stamps, and rolls back some clean energy credits. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that in all, the bill could increase the national debt by $3.3 trillion, something the White House disputes. Now, keep in mind, the bill in its current form is nearly 1,000 pages long. So what I just laid out there, obviously not all of it, just some of it. Joining me now is one of the folks who's going to vote on this thing, Congressman Kevin Kiley, Republican from the state of California. Hello, sir.
Hello, good to be with you.
Thanks for coming in. So you heard Congressman Burchett there. He's not the only one with some reservations, as now the focus shifts to you. The focus was on the Senate for a while, right? And now the House, but also not supporting the bill. I've got a list here, a handful of folks who just flat out don't support it, and then some others who, at this point in time, say, you know what, I'm not there yet. Sure. Does this survive in the House? Does it make it?
Well, look, I haven't been, I don't think that going into the prediction business is a good idea when you're in this world. But I would say don't bet against it. I mean, we see these lists of, people who say they're against it or say they're going to vote no. We kind of had the same thing happen when this bill first went through the House. At the end of the day, we got to get across the finish.
Is it grandstanding? That's the word that the president used, grandstanding. Is it negotiating? Do you actually think that it was just a little too much for some of these folks?
Well, look, I mean, we're all fighting for our districts and for what we believe is the right thing for the country, and we all do that in different ways. And so, for example, where I have had issues with the bill, I've been very clear about what my issues are, and we've actually gotten them changed. Like, there was a provision that would have allowed for the sale of public lands without meaningful local input. That would have been terrible for my district. We have some of those beautiful public lands in the country. I spoke out against it. We relayed our concerns to the relevant parties. We got that provision removed.
All right. There's the possibility, or at least the question of, would the Senate just send it over to you and you guys have to take it up, no changes? The president was asked about that earlier today. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
They're going to ask for certain changes, probably. I don't know. I mean, I guess what would happen, if that happens, you'd then have to run it fast past the Senate, so it, never ends. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Don't know what's going to happen there. What if they send it to you guys and this starts to get red marked all over the place? Are you ready to play the ping pong game of then the Senate does it, then you do it, and back and forth, or does that not happen?
Well, we'll see how things go. I mean, at the end of the day, you're never going to arrive at a product that is perfect from the perspective of all 435 members of the House and all 100 members of the Senate. when you're dealing with legislation of this magnitude. But when it comes to the fundamental things that are in this bill, I mean, the question is, do we want to give Americans significant tax relief, or do we want to have the biggest tax increase in American
Or do you want to run up federal debt nonstop like it has been, right? I mean, this is federal debt by year. Republicans are just as guilty as Democrats of this, as you know, Congressman. Debt increased by $9 trillion during the first Trump term. It's projected to be $55 trillion a decade from now. This bill doesn't stop it. That doesn't concern you?
There's absolute truth to what you're saying, that both parties have their share of blame for the fact that this debt crisis has spiraled out of control. Yeah. And we're now spending more on interest servicing the debt every year than we're spending on defense. It's absolutely crazy, and we do need to begin getting the debt crisis under control.
But you could do it now, though, and you're not.
This bill does make significant spending reductions, and there's only so much we can do within the framework of budget reconciliation. But I will say this, when you look at these estimates claiming that it's going to increase the deficit by however many $1 trillion, they made similar claims about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017.
Oh, that's why I don't highlight the estimates, because there's a record of, I just showed you the debt of what actually happened, and we know that thing's not stopping. That's up and to the right as far as
But so there absolutely needs to be both things. We need to have economic growth, and we need to have responsible reductions in spending. I think that this bill does do both of those things. Obviously, it's not going to solve the whole problem at once, but it gets us moving in the right direction.
Elon Musk, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing spending and then immediately vowed for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame, and they will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth. What would you say to Mr. Musk?
Well, I know Mr. Musk actually is very optimistic about the potential to catalyze significant economic growth. He takes the debt and the deficit extremely seriously, as you can see from that, as he should. But I think that the other side of this, we need to responsibly reduce spending. We also want to catalyze economic growth, because when you do that, you actually increase government revenues. That's what happened with the first Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I think that Elon will be the first to tell you that with the technological innovation we have around the corner, when it comes to AI, when it comes to other leading technologies, we actually have an opportunity, if we have the right policy, to catalyze economic growth unlike anything we've ever seen in this country.
He's basically, though, threatening to primary every Republican under the sun. Are you concerned?
Well, look, everyone runs every 2 years.
Okay.
And you have the potential to be challenged from your right, from your left, any which way. That's what we all signed up for.
All right, Kevin Kiley, Republican from California. We'll see what happens here. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate the time.
You bet.
Talk to you again soon. All right, so when the bill passed up on the Hill, the president was about 1,000 miles away in the Florida Everglades, touring what the state of Florida is now calling Alligator Alcatraz. It's the site of a remote airport located deep in the Florida Everglades there. Florida and the federal government plan to build a detention center for undocumented immigrants awaiting deportation.
If you care about balancing the budget, the single most impactful step we can take is to fully reverse the Biden migration invasion, one of the worst invasions we've ever had. We've never had an invasion like this.
All right, come on in. Mick Mulvaney, News Nation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Hello, sir.
Where do you want to start, Berman?
I want to start at Alligator Alcatraz, because with everything that was going on, the president wasn't here. I know, I'm very well aware that there's a phone on Air Force One, so if he wanted to pick it up, he could use it. But why did he go down there? What was the statement he was trying to make, if any?
That he wasn't supposed to be in Washington this week anyway. Again, this was supposed to be a week off, right? So this got planned several weeks ago. But it does play into the narrative about the importance of immigration. We talk a lot about the fiscal parts of the one big, beautiful bill, but there is a bunch of stuff in there in addition to money on immigration. So Donald Trump has always known that immigration is one of his best issues. So when you want to sort of change a narrative, go back to your best arguments.
You started the House Freedom Caucus. There is no House Freedom Caucus, right? You were part of the initial group?
Yep.
Right. Okay, you're one of the founders of it. They're not thrilled with this. What are you hearing, Mulvaney? And do you think that this is in trouble in the House?
Yeah, one thing that Congressman said, he said a bunch of things I agree and understand with, but probably the smartest thing he said was try not to get in the prediction business. I'm going to give you some predictions. Okay. All right. So I'm not as smart as he is. It's absolutely going to pass. Okay. And it's probably going to pass tomorrow. Don't ever underestimate Donald Trump's ability to whip the House. The White House has known from the very beginning that they have a lot more influence over House members than they do over senators. So they just needed something to pass the Senate. So I do not see the House sending this to conference, which is where they said, look, we don't agree with everything the Senate does, so let's go to conference. They're going to do something. So the only thing I think left to do is actually to just eat it and vote for it, which is what I think you're going to see in the next 24 hours.
All right. I see the turtle. I see the fish. That means you're in our Conch Republic Bureau down there in Key West, Mick. But you're also very familiar with the Carolinas. And one of the casualties of all this was Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina. And President Trump was asked today about Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, possibly running for the Senate in that state. I want to play his comments, get your reaction real quick.
She's a great person, Laura Trump. I mean, that would always be my first choice, but she doesn't live there now. But she's there all the time. Her parents, and you know, she really knows North Carolina well, and I won it 3 times.
Realistic or no, Mick, that she runs for Senate in North Carolina?
It's not off the list. Believe me, there's a lot of crazier things that could happen in Washington, D.C. or in Raleigh. Look, she's from North Carolina. She's a serious person. I know Trump is right. She has moved away then, but you can obviously just move right back. So this is not a case of a carpetbagger. Woman is from eastern North Carolina down by the coast. So she's legitimate. There's a name that, you know, listen, it's always the usual suspects, House members, state lawmakers, etc. Don't discount Michael Whatley. Michael Whatley, the head of the Republican National Committee right now, is from North Carolina and used to head the party there as well. So that would be a name I'd put on the list along with Laura Trump. Clearly, but one thing, if Laura's in, then she's got Donald's support. There's no question.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mick Mulvaney, thank you, sir. Enjoy the sunshine. Talk soon.
Thanks very much, Blake.
You got it. Still much more ahead tonight here on The Hill. Could a Democratic socialist be running New York City soon? This is one of the questions I get asked. Really? Is this going to happen? Other side of the break, Scott Traynor is going to show you the numbers about what is likely to come next. And is the world's richest man about to shake up Congress when The Hill returns?
Today.
Zoran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zoran Mamdani?
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation.
All right. That, of course, President Trump down in the Florida Everglades today, touring the grand opening of a new ICE detention center called Alligator Alcatraz. He visited the facility alongside the Governor Ron DeSantis and the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, but had that to say there about who is now the Democratic nominee for New York City mayor, Zoran Mamdani. The president suggesting that he could be arrested if he doesn't cooperate with ICE. Now, Mamdani fired back with a statement today, reading a part quote of Trump. His statements don't just represent an attack on our democracy, but an attempt to send a message to every New Yorker who refuses to hide in the shadows. If you speak up, they will come for you. We will not accept this intimidation. Now, as for the mayor's race tonight, it is official. The self-described Democratic socialist won the Democratic primary in America's largest city with 56% of the vote, beating out the former New York governor, Andrew Cuomo. With me now, the man behind the numbers. He is the data science director over at DDHQ. You know him already, Scott Traynor. Hello, sir.
Thanks for having me. What a clip. That's going to be a great fundraising clip for Mamdani. The president saying he's going to arrest him, by the way.
And you told me you're looking forward to the fundraising numbers.
Oh, yeah. We're going to see if he raises a lot of his money outside of New York. I think he could be the next Beto O'Rourke in terms of national appeal. We'll see how wide it is. Okay. He's going to get some money outside of New York.
So here's the question, and let's throw out. So this was the mayoral, the sort of when they pared him down to 2, what happened today?
Yeah.
56%. Now the question is a Democratic socialist going to be the mayor of America's largest city? To repeat that, a Democratic socialist being the mayor of America's largest city. You think it's highly probable.
Yeah, and look, the bettors, the people who do this for money on Kalshi, think it's the same theory, 73%. Now, that's basically out of the gate. I think that's going to go up and down, especially as we figure out whether Cuomo is going to stay in.
Right.
how some of the polling goes, but he's highly favored.
Okay, so we see Mamdani versus Eric Adams, who's the current mayor running as an independent. And part of the question/calculus, Scott, is what happens if Andrew Cuomo gets in? What does that sort of four-way race look like? Because there's a Republican candidate as well, obviously. And if he doesn't get in, then what does that three-way race look like, and who does it benefit?
Look, in a four-way race, Mamdani's got to feel good because his 450,000 votes, his core votes, they're not going anywhere. They're not figuring out whether they're going Cuomo or Adams. What if you want to beat Mamdani, if you're the part of that crew, whether you're Cuomo or Adams, you want a one-on-one matchup. And you really want a one-on-one matchup without the Republican candidate Sliwa in there. So that'll be interesting to me is who stays in, who stays out. Now, we don't know about, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, but we know Adams is in.
Right. Bottom line is you think no matter who's in or who's not in, it's highly probable.
I think the bettor's got it right on this one. Now, a lot of race to run, but that's where it is.
It's still in November, right? There's a ways to go, a whole summer and all that. We will be watching. Scott Traynor, Data Science Director over at DDHQ. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having
me. Appreciate it. All right. Still to come, President Trump and Elon Musk take two.
I think what's going to happen is Doge is going to look at Musk. And if Doge looks at Musk, we're going to save a fortune.
The president threatening to unleash Doge on the creator of Doge. Is that really what's coming next?
News Nation tomorrow. Big headlines call for a night of big guests. Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith, James Carville, all live for a full hour on Cuomo. Tomorrow at 8/7 Central, only on News Nation.
All right, so he was the darling of the right just a few months ago. Elon Musk now threatening the political fate of just about every Republican here in this town, or at least the ones who are supporting the big, beautiful bill. Quote, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame. And they will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on earth. You got to imagine the president didn't react to that lightly. He is now potentially looking to sick Doge on its original owner, suggesting earlier today that Musk's bitterness over the bill was not about economics, but rather about selling more Teslas. Watch.
Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. Who else but this guy would design this, and everybody on the road is looking at it. It's amazing, actually. As soon as I saw it, I said, that is the coolest design.
How time flies. Full panel here with me now. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Jasmine Wright, White House correspondent for the digital news outlet Notice. Denise Gitsham, News Nation political contributor. And Yemisi Egbawale is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. Hi. We've had quite the day, and I'm glad we get to talk about this. You think Trump goes down this road, Jasmine?
I think he might. I think one of the largest questions hanging over their relationship after they reconciled was, what does Elon do if the bill looks like it's going to pass? And now we know he's starting to make trouble again. And so the president says that he's basically going to bring Doge on them. I went and asked somebody about the White House about this, and they said that they're not going to preview what President Trump does. But obviously, he has a lot of leverage hanging over Elon Musk's head, because he's not wrong that Elon Musk makes a lot of money from the government. In fact, it powers so much of his industry. But of course, Elon Musk has a lot of money. And so that's his own leverage.
I think Trump is just trying to show his strength, but I think there'll be a ceasefire between him and Elon in the end.
You really think so? Because folks like a month ago when this happened were like, it's inevitable. They're going to reconcile. It moved the other direction.
Yeah, but here's what I think. Trump, for all his chest beating, is scared of Musk's capacity to affect public perception through X. And I think that's why he's not eager to get into a fully fledged outright
But didn't he lose this time, though? I mean, he wasn't able to mount that public pressure campaign against the senators, maybe because he started too late in that second round. So
I think that was very late on, and I think Trump is more worried about the broader management of perception.
All right, so your side of the aisle loved him, your side of the aisle hated him, and now there's a little bit...
It used to be the other way around.
Yeah, it used used to be that, now it's this, and is there another tone shift? Because here's what I want to play. I spoke to a Democratic congressman yesterday and a Republican congressman yesterday. Here it was rolling.
It's certainly interesting him making those type of claims when he's made a significant amount of money off subsidies from the federal government in the form of electric vehicle subsidies. And those are the type of things that need to be cut in this bill.
I don't always agree with Elon Musk. I do agree with him on this. Anyone who votes for this bill is voting for a really bad bill.
Well, that for a tone shift.
Politics makes for strange and unpredictable bedfellows, and they often change, unfortunately. And I just want to say, if women were in charge in Washington, you would not see this kind of back and forth, just for the record. Okay. But look, $38 billion of government subsidies for Elon and his companies. I actually worked
Were you saying this in January and February and March?
No, I actually was the one that helped get him for him. When I worked at my law firm on K Street, like every time he would say things like, I don't get any subsidies for Tesla, I worked on it for a year and a half, and we actually got you the $7,500 electric vehicle tax credit. So a lot of this is almost as rich as Elon Musk, but he definitely has way more to lose than President Trump.
So now your side is cool with him a little bit?
Well, I think maybe a couple members of Congress, but for the most part, I think that members are focused on the fact that Elon, at the end of the day, is going to be fine when this bill passes, if it ends up passing, but working class American families are going to have a little bit of struggle here. And so I don't think a lot of members are going to focus so much on the will they, won't they with the Elon-Trump romance, and I think they'll focus more on the constituents and the families that live in their districts and their states.
I was curious on this idea of Elon primarying Republicans, right? There were 14 House Republicans who supported the big, beautiful bill that won by less than 5%. 5 of them won by less than 2%, Denise. And it gets to the question of, if you are, for lack of a better term, vulnerable, right? You're in a very tight district. How much do you worry about that threat?
Yeah, I mean, Elon threw a lot of money in that Wisconsin Supreme Court, race, and he didn't really get very much from it. Money doesn't make a candidate. You have to have a candidate, and if you get money behind it, it changes things. Even if you're in a really tight swing district, I find that principle always prevails over money. So he may be able to get in. And look, I'm not going to argue with the fact that Americans are looking for a third option. I mean, I ran for Congress in a district where there were more independents than there were Republicans or Democrats. So there's definitely an appetite there. But I don't think Elon Musk, with his lack of credibility, back and forthing, finding opportunism at its height, is going to be the one that leads it.
I've been asking Republicans this, and I haven't gotten any, but you wouldn't expect them to say that. But there's also a very real public versus private dimension to this, of what they say and what they actually think.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll agree one point here. Money really doesn't determine elections. If it did, Andrew Cuomo would be be looking at being the NYC mayor. But I know there are so many frustrations with a lot of Democratic senators on the fact that a lot of Republicans are saying things behind closed doors about how they feel about the bill and about the relationship between Elon and Trump. But at the end of the day, I think one thing that I will say to compliment the president is that he is able to make sure that his party falls in line. And so I think regardless of the Elon noise, Trump still has...
It was interesting, to your point, Mick Mulvaney said to me he thinks this gets done, that they'll eventually fall in line. What about that threat?
I mean, Donald Trump runs his party tight like a ship. And even today, when Senator Murkowski struggled through her vote, she still voted yes. And so he said that he thinks it's going to be an actual easier time this time around the House. He might be accurate. But these people, yes, they may be afraid of Elon Musk and they may be afraid of Elon Musk's money, but they're also really afraid of Donald Trump and those Truth Socials.
Yeah, their fear of Trump is greater than their fear of Musk. But that doesn't mean that Musk's money can't matter. And it's not money on one side and principle on the other, because Musk can actually make the case in this instance that those people who have voted for this bill are claiming fiscal conservatism and voting for legislation that's going to increase the deficit by $3 trillion.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the other side of the break, with all the talk about the bill and the president and the House and the Senate, what all of that has to do, especially on this July 1st, with America's pastime. I'll connect the dots, my take, other side. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she's following that surprise plea deal out in Idaho. Elizabeth, 7.5 minutes away. My take, other side. Stay with us.
Today.
All right, if you're just getting home, catching up on your day, here is what's topping the hill, what's trending in this town and beyond. Vance breaks 50-50 tie as Senate passes GOP megabill. He had to go. He does have a vote in a 50-50 say, right? And so he went up to Capitol Hill today, gave that 51st vote up on the Hill in the Senate to send the big, beautiful bill back to the House. Second story there. This was the moment, really, it happened at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Murkowski laments agonizing process to yes on GOP tax bill. There was one moment overnight in which Senate leadership had to sort of have a conversation with her on the Senate floor in order to get her to yes. And then out of all things, there's this, also trending. Trump unveils $249 Trump fragrances. That's some of what's topping the Hill. You want to check out those stories and more, all you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen. Of course, you can head on over to thehill.com. All right. He is nicknamed, of course, the deal maker in chief, and President Trump is looking to close the biggest legislative deal of his second term. Many of his campaign promises in the form of the one big, beautiful bill. And now it's batter up, you could say, for the House of Representatives after the Senate advanced the bill. But should everyone in this town take a clue from a former slugger? How about this for a change-up? Today in the sports world, July 1st is fondly known as Bobby Bonilla Day. That's because in 1999, the New York Mets agreed to pay out the struggling all-star who was owed $5.9 million. Bonilla struck a deal for 25 straight years. On this day, the Mets would pay him roughly $1.2 million, hitting $30 million for the lifespan of the payout. All right, so back to the bill now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you should be for or against it. That's what the other folks do. But think about what Bonilla did for a second, as he basically said he didn't want to splurge now. He wanted to plan for later. Now, in 2035, when Bonilla collects the last of his checks from the Mets, it's estimated, by the way, that the Social Security Trust Fund starts to run dry. And if you thought the debate was heated now, just wait until then. But at least one person probably won't have to worry about all of that. Bobby Bonilla. That's my take tonight. Thank you so much for watching. We will cover it all again tomorrow. I'm Blake Burman. Have a